Marcus Williams had grown accustomed to being invisible. For 3 years, he'd mopped these same gleaming marble floors of Henderson Corporate Tower, emptied trash cans that cost more than his monthly rent, and polished conference tables where million-dollar deals were struck. The executives who hurried past him each morning didn't see the calloused hands that had once built custom furniture, or the tired eyes that stayed awake until 2 a.m. helping his 8-year-old daughter Emma with her math homework. They saw only the navy blue uniform with maintenance embroidered on the chest to a uniform that had become both his armor and his invisibility cloak. But tonight was different. Tonight, Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of the company's grand auditorium, his heart hammering against his ribs as he stared at the elaborate stage where tomorrow's annual charity gala would unfold. The same gala where CEO Jonathan Henderson would announce the company's biggest philanthropic initiative of the year. The same gala that Emma had been talking about for weeks, ever since she'd learned that some of the money raised would go to funding after-school programs for kids like her. Just one busted light, Marcus whispered to himself, gripping his toolbox tighter. Fix the light, get home to Emma. The auditorium stretched before him like a cathedral, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows. Red velvet seats marched in perfect rows toward the stage, where an army of spotlights waited to illuminate tomorrow's festivities. All except a stubborn stage light that had died during the afternoon's rehearsal, leaving a dark spot in the otherwise flawless lighting design. Marcus had volunteered to stay late when the regular maintenance crew had gone home. Overtime meant an extra $40. And $40 meant Emma could get the new school supplies she needed without him having to choose between notebooks and groceries again. As he climbed the narrow ladder behind the stage, Marcus's mind drifted to the conversation he'd had with Emma that morning. She'd been unusually quiet over her bowl of generic cereal, stirring the milk with mechanical precision. "Dad," she'd finally said, not looking up. "Do you think rich people are happier than us?" The question had hit him like a punch to the gut. At 8 years old, Emma was already noticing the difference between their cramped one-bedroom apartment and the sprawling houses of her classmates. She was beginning to understand why she wore the same 3 outfits in rotation while other kids showed up in different designer clothes every day. "Happiness doesn't come from money, sweetheart," he'd told her, kneeling beside her chair. "It comes from the people who love you and the good you do in the world." Emma had nodded solemnly, but Marcus had seen the doubt flickering in her dark eyes that mirrored his own. How could he expect an 8-year-old to believe that when the evidence suggested otherwise, when her father worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads while other dads took their kids on Disney vacations? Now, 30 feet above the stage floor, Marcus wrestled with the burnt-out bulb. The metal housing was hot despite the light being dead, and his fingers fumbled with the unfamiliar fixture. This wasn't the simple maintenance he was used to, replacing fluorescent tubes in office buildings and fixing leaky faucets. This was precision lighting equipment worth more than he made in 6 months. The bulb finally gave way with a sharp crack, and Marcus nearly lost his balance on the ladder. As he steadied himself, a folded piece of paper fluttered from his shirt pocket to Emma's latest drawing, which he always carried with him. It was a stick figure family, a tall man in a blue shirt holding hands with a small girl under a rainbow that spelled out "Best Dad Ever" in uneven crayon letters. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Emma had always been his light in the darkness, his reason to keep going when every muscle ached and every bill felt insurmountable. She was the reason he'd taken this job in the first place. He had steady hours, health insurance, and benefits that his previous construction work couldn't provide after his back injury. He'd never told Emma about the dreams he'd given up, how he'd once run his own small woodworking business, crafting custom pieces that filled him with pride. How he'd lost everything when Sarah, Emma's mother, had left them both for a life she said held more promise than raising a child with a man who lacked ambition. Emma was too young to remember her mother, but Marcus carried that abandonment like a stone in his chest, proof that he wasn't enough, not successful enough, not wealthy enough, not enough, period. The new bulb screwed in easily, and Marcus flicked the switch. Nothing happened. He checked the connection again, tightened everything, tried once more. Still nothing. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. If he couldn't fix this, they'd have to call in the expensive lighting technicians tomorrow morning. The delay would cost the company thousands. And Marcus knew exactly who would get blamed. He was about to climb down and admit defeat when he noticed something odd. The light fixture wasn't just burned out, it was unplugged. Someone had disconnected the main power cable, probably during the installation of additional decorations. Marcus followed the cable with his flashlight until he found the connection point, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. As he plugged it back in, the stage erupted in brilliant light. But it wasn't just the single spotlight he'd been sent to fix. The power cable he'd connected controlled an entire bank of lights that had been installed for tomorrow's presentation. The stage transformed before his eyes, revealing something that made his breath catch in his throat. There, illuminated in perfect detail, was a massive backdrop he hadn't seen in the darkness. A painted mural depicting children of all colors and backgrounds reading, playing, learning. And across the bottom, in gold letters 10 feet high, were the words, "The Emma Williams Educational Foundation." Marcus's legs nearly gave out beneath him. He gripped the ladder, staring at his daughter's name blazing across the stage in lights that seemed to pierce straight through his chest. This had to be a coincidence. There were probably thousands of Emmas in the world. This couldn't possibly be about his Emma, his little girl who wore second-hand clothes and did homework by the light of a desk lamp they'd bought at a garage sale. But as he stared at the mural, details began to register that made his heart race. The painted children weren't generic figures, they were specific, real. And there, in the center of the group, was a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile that he'd know anywhere. It was Emma, his Emma, painted larger than life and surrounded by the artistic interpretation of dreams he'd never dared to dream for her. "Mr. Williams?" Marcus spun round so fast he nearly fell from the ladder. Jonathan Henderson stood at the base of the platform, looking up at him with an expression Marcus had never seen on the CEO's face: uncertainty, almost vulnerability. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus stammered, climbing down quickly. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just fixing the light like you asked. I didn't mean to. You weren't supposed to see this yet." Henderson's voice was quiet, measured. "The presentation isn't until tomorrow night." Marcus felt like he might throw up. He'd stumbled onto some private corporate secret, seen something he wasn't supposed to see. His mind raced through possibilities. Or was this some kind of marketing campaign using his daughter's name and image without permission? Was he about to lose his job for discovering it? "Sir, I don't understand what this is, but if there's been some mistake here." Henderson held up a hand, stopping him. "There's no mistake, Marcus." "May I call you Marcus?" Marcus nodded, too confused and frightened to speak. Henderson walked closer, his expensive shoes echoing in the vast space. 3 months ago, my daughter Sophia came home from school talking about her new friend Emma Williams. She couldn't stop talking about how smart Emma was, how kind, how she always shared her lunch with kids who forgot theirs even though she barely had enough for herself. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd always packed extra crackers in Emma's lunch, telling her they were just in case she got extra hungry, but secretly hoping she'd have something to share if she met someone who needed it more. Sophia started asking questions. Henderson continued. Why didn't Emma have new clothes like the other kids? Why couldn't she come to birthday parties at places that cost money? Why did she always seem tired on Monday mornings? Marcus felt his face burning with shame. He'd tried so hard to shield Emma from their struggles, to make sure she never felt different or less than her classmates. Apparently, he'd failed. So I did what any father would do, Henderson said, his voice growing softer. I investigated. Not to intrude, but to understand. Do you know what I found? Marcus shook his head, not trusting his voice. I found a single father working 3 jobs to support his daughter. A man who'd given up his own business to take a job with health insurance when his child needed it. A man who volunteers at the food bank every Sunday morning, even though he probably qualifies for their services himself. A man whose daughter tells everyone who'll listen that her dad is her hero. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, but he couldn't speak, couldn't move. I found a little girl who tutors other students during recess instead of playing, because her father taught her that helping others is more important than personal gain. A girl who saves her allowance to buy supplies for classmates who can't afford them. A girl who wrote an essay about her hero or her father that made grown teachers cry. Henderson reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Marcus recognized it immediately. It was Emma's handwriting, the careful cursive she'd been practicing for weeks. My dad is the strongest person I know, Henderson read aloud. Not because he can lift heavy things, but because he never gives up. When other kids make fun of my old clothes, my dad tells me that what matters is the heart inside them. When I'm scared or sad, my dad holds me and tells me stories about all the good things we're going to do together. My dad works very hard so I can have everything I need, and he never complains, even when I know he's tired. My dad says that being rich means having people who love you, and that makes us the richest family in the world. Marcus was sobbing now, his shoulders shaking as 3 years of exhaustion, fear, and love poured out of him in the blazing stage lights. Henderson approached slowly and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. The Emma Williams Educational Foundation, Henderson said quietly, will provide scholarships, after-school programs, mentorship opportunities, and support for families like yours. Families where love and character matter more than bank account balances. The foundation launches tomorrow with a $10 million endowment. Marcus looked up at him through his tears. I don't understand. Why? Henderson's eyes were bright with unshed tears of his own. Because my daughter came home one day and asked me a question that changed everything. She asked me why I spent so much time making money when I could be spending time making a difference. She asked me why her friend's dad, who had so little, seemed so much happier than her dad, who had everything. He paused, looking up at the backdrop where Emma's painted face smiled down at them both. She asked me if I thought Emma's dad knew he was teaching the whole world how to be a better father just by loving his daughter the way he does. And I realized that the answer was no. You had no idea. You were just being the man your daughter needed you to be, the same way you are every single day. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. She's everything to me. I know, Henderson said. And that's exactly why this foundation bears her name. Because Emma Williams represents every child who deserves a chance, and you represent every parent who's willing to sacrifice everything to give them that chance. He handed Marcus an envelope. Inside is a contract offering you a position as the foundation's community outreach coordinator. The salary is 4 times what you're making now, with full benefits and a flexible schedule so you can be the father Emma needs. If you're interested. Marcus stared at the envelope in his shaking hands. I don't have a college degree. I'm just a janitor. You're a man who raised a daughter who changes everyone she meets just by being who you taught her to be. Henderson replied, "You're a man who sees the good in people and brings out the best in them. You're exactly what this foundation needs." The two men stood in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the warm glow of the stage lights. Finally, Marcus looked up at the painted mural of his daughter. "Will you tell me something honestly, Mr. Henderson?" "Jonathan, and yes, anything. Are rich people happier than the rest of us?" Henderson followed his gaze to the mural, where painted children of all backgrounds played together under a rainbow not unlike the one Emma had drawn in crayon. "I used to think so," he said quietly, "but I've learned something from watching you and Emma. Wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. And by that measure, Marcus Williams, you're the richest man I've ever met." As they walked towards the exit together, Marcus pulled out his phone to call Emma. He couldn't wait to hear her voice, to tell her about the extraordinary thing that had happened, to let her know that sometimes dreams really do come true. But first, he wanted to tell her something even more important. He wanted to tell her that she'd been right all along. They were already the richest family in the world, because they had each other. Everything else was just extra light.